This question, we are asked to, let's see, find Colleen's speed. The first time that she travels in her Hyundai Sonata. Quite like those cars. Anyway, so probably the best way to do this, I've got a distance, I've got a speed, and it looks like I've got some time. So it's the classic question of figuring out what the distance is, what the rate is, and the time, and then determining which of those variables you need to equate and solve system of equations. So let's look at the distance, the rate, and the time for the fast trip and for the slower one. Oh no, for the faster one. Whoops. Let's call it first trip and then the faster one. So the first time she traveled 200 miles. Her rate, we don't know, so we'll call it R. The time, we don't know the time R, we'll call it T. The second time, the faster one, she went the same distance, but she went 10 miles per hour faster, so it'd be rate plus 10. And then her time was 1 hour less, so it'd be T minus 1. Okay, and all of these, the rate would be in miles per hour, and the time would be in hours. Okay, so I need to relate one of those variables, and then use solving system of equations, probably using substitution. So let's try it. Um, so it probably doesn't matter which we equate. Why don't we do the time one? So here's my formula. Rate is equal to the distance over the time. But if I wanted to solve for t, I'm going to put the t up top there. So it'd be t equals d over r. Okay, just look at that formula. I could multiply both sides by t, and then these t's cancel, and then I'll divide both sides by r. So these r's cancel. I'm left with d over r. Okay, you need to be able to manipulate that equation like that. Now let's use this and write it twice. So for the first trip, we'll go, so first trip, we'll go t is equal to the distance, that's 200. I'll just write the formula, d over r. So t equals the distance is 200 over the rate was r. Okay, now let's do the faster trip. So time, here's my formula, t equals d over r. So this time my time is t minus 1 equals the distance, still 200, over the rate, this time is the r, is r plus 10. Okay, so now I've got two equations in t and r, and so I can solve. Probably the easiest way to do this one is substitution. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this for t, and I'm going to plug it in everywhere I see a t over there. Okay, substitution. All right, so instead of a t, I'm putting 200 over r minus 1 equals 200 over r plus 10. So now I've got an equation with just a rate in it. And that's actually what they're asking me for in the question. So I'll be able to just, right from this, once I solve it, tell them what r is. Okay, I've got r in the denominator, and so I need to use the I hate fraction rule, figure out what my lowest common denominator is. Lowest common denominator would be r times r plus 10. So I need to multiply each term by r times r plus 10. So I'll take 200 over r minus, and I'll take 1, and I'll take 200 over r plus 10. And I'll take each of those and multiply it by r times r plus 10. R times r plus 10. Look at that negative brackets, dirty negative there. Careful. That's an r. And then r times r plus 10. Now I look for factors of 1 that I can eliminate. In this first one, I have an r and an r. So on the top there, I'm just going to have r plus 10 times 200. I'll have to use the distributive property there. Next one I'll have minus r times r plus 10 times 1, but I can leave that out. And then the r plus 10s cancel. R plus 10s go, so I'd be left with r, whoops, r, I need red, r times 200. Now I've got an equation with no denominators, and I can solve. Let's use distributive there, so it'd be 200r plus 2000. And then here, distribute again, careful with that negative, so it'd be minus r squared minus 10r equals 200r. Okay, so now I need to collect like terms and move stuff around. Since my r squared's negative, I'm going to move everything over to the right-hand side. So the r squared would be positive over on the right side. This 200r, when I move it over, it would subtract, it would cancel that one. That's interesting. If I move this one over, it would be a plus 10r. And then I'd move the 2000 over, that would be minus 2000. So now I need to solve this equation, or solve this. Lots of different ways to do it. I could factor it, I could complete the square, I could do a number of different different solutions, or use that formula. The formula would work too. Now in this particular one, it looks like it's real nice for completing the square. Let me just try that. I'll put the 2000 back over here, r squared plus 10r. Now to complete the square, I'll take this and divide it by 2 and square it. So that'd be plus 25. And then over here, I'd have to add 25. So on this side, I'd have 2025 equals r plus 5 all squared. Now I'll square root both sides. So I'll have square root of 2025 equals r plus 5. And now I'll have the square root of 2025, whatever that comes out to, hope and even, minus 5 equals r. Again, you could have solved that other ways. You could have tried to factor it. Might have been hard to factor, but factor, formula, any of those ways. But completing the square, that works too. Okay, let me see if my calculator gives me something for that. Square root of 2025. Okay, where's my square root button? Square root 2025. 45 comes out exactly even. So this is 45, take away 5 equals r. So r is equal to 40. Now one thing I've missed, and you might have noticed, but when you take the square root of both sides, this one has to be a plus or minus. So I should have a plus or minus on each of those. So really, if I have plus 45 minus 5, that's 40. But if it's minus 45 minus 5, that'd be minus 50. So I take a look at them to see which makes sense. A negative rate of speed doesn't make sense. So I'd be going with 40. Okay, hopefully that helps. Now, just going back to the spot where I could have factored right there, I probably wouldn't have looked, I probably wouldn't have found that, but 40 would have been one of my options. And I'll bet it's 40 times 50. So it'd be r minus 40, r plus 50. In factoring, I'll bet those would have been my numbers I could have used. I would have had a hard time finding those though. Anyway, so the rate of speed was 40 miles an hour. Hopefully that helps in that question.